just to talk with you all and welcome you back for the 3rd anniversary of Nuremberg Actions and the absolutely momentous changes we made together and in each other's lives. Okay, let's get going. Francisco, would you like to join us and begin with your song?
Ready to tune up, everybody? Oh, nice. Was the 1st of September, first day of the fast, to stop the deadly weapons for Central America. 3 valiant peaks, bringing home the message of truth, hope, and love. Nicaragua, Guatemala, and El Salvador, y Mexico. People want the freedom, not this filthy war. Listen to the laughter, listen to their pain, and they stop the death train. Welcome everybody. It was the 1st of September, day I'll never forget. We were seeing Jesus, clothes ripped off his body, he was taken away, lost both of his legs to that Navy train. Like the children of Nicaragua and the children of El Salvador, who given him so much life so that he can be in the midst of the torture, in the midst of the pain. We tried to come together to support Brian as he lay. David was arrested, Duncan laid injured on the ground, trying to sing along with our tear-filled song. And we sang that day, overcome, we shall overcome, we shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. And the word to the man who, following orders, tried to kill our friends. You are not the enemy. Don't be a puppet and a pawn. Regain your dignity and come and stop the bomb. Oh, because in Nicaragua, people want the freedom, not this filthy war. Freedom to have more than tortillas, freedom to live our own lives. So like Brian and Duncan and Dave, come help us stop the lies. Oh, and stop the death train. Come on, stop the death train. Stop the death train. La 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 la. Brian spoke for thousands who've lost legs in life. Blood stained on the tracks that day and in Central America. But the blood is the seed of liberty, and I really do believe of that seed we are the fruit. So as Duncan sang with us, and as Holly helped Brian came to realize, oh yes, that we had just begun. And we sang that day, we have just begun. We have just begun to oh, deep in my heart, I do believe I'll overcome someday.
Francisco, as wonderful as always. Thank you for opening our circle. Now we're going to welcome Holly Rowan in, and then I'll name 5 people to give their shares. Each share will, after Holly will be 2 to 3 minutes. So please be reflecting on a moment on the tracks, a special memory you'd like to share, a reflection, or something that has happened to you in your lives since we were together 33 years ago. Holly, welcome to the table.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for that. Francisco, so beautiful to sing that with you here in my own little crone cave. I am just overcome right now with emotion, seeing every single one of your faces. And I just jumped for joy, Brian, when I saw you jump in here with us too, and that you're here. I want you all to know that Brian and I spoke for a long time yesterday, and hearing what every single one of us have been doing for the last 33 years. And probably, like myself, you've been doing peace. You've been waging peace in the ways you can. And those of us that were on the tracks on September 1st, and those of you and some of us that remained on the tracks ongoing for so many years, I just thank you deeply from the bottom of my heart and to peace through nonviolent direct action. So really what happened on the tracks was foundational for all of us. And some of you were with Brian and me 10 days before he lost his legs. We spoke vows to each other in a most unusual partnering wedding ceremony. And I thought it would be very appropriate for me to read you our vows, because these are vows really that all of us took as a way or another on the track. Brian will agree with me, we are still connected at the heart in the very, very deepest place. And these vows are still being honored, believe it or not. So very briefly, I'm gonna speak these and then I wanna listen to all of you. We commit to a path of ever seeking the truth as citizens of the planet Earth, equally with all other humans, just to be separate from one another due to work, travel, jail, injury, or even physical death, or other women. I just added that. We resolve to resist vigorously and publicly policies and lifestyles that contribute to the death, maiming, and destruction of dignity of other people. We resolve to non-cooperate with the institutions and the policies of. We make this commitment because we love and we affirm life for all people as equals. We are not more valuable than people of other nations, ethnic groups, races, political or religious persuasions. We share the anguish of the world that comes from the violence and the greed of the first world. So we shall vigorously and with the help of the great extricate ourselves from civilization that robs us of our humanity and robs others of their physical lives. We seek to live and work with others with equality, and we equally desire to build a new sense of community that enables us to be empowered together to be part of the nonviolent revolution that we also desperately need in the United States. I'd like to leave you with the words of Martin Luther King from his address, Declaration of Independence from the war in Vietnam. I'm not going to read Martin Luther King's words. You all know them. And I don't know how to sum up what I've been doing in 33 years, but its foundation is in what happened on the tracks. I've been shot at, arrested, maimed myself, and waging peace. And I'm looking forward to hear from all of you. And I love each one of you. Just seeing you again just opens my heart. So now we'll open the floor to the rest of you. Thank you for this opportunity to share our calls again.
Much love, Holly, and thank you so much for setting the tone for our sharing. I'm going to invite the first 5 people, and we don't have very many hands raised, so I'll call on, ask some of those of you who are on phones who can't raise your hand to come forward. So Dorothy Granada, we are thrilled that you're with us from Nicaragua, and I know you only have a short period of time, or you may have a short period of time, so we're going to ask you to share first, followed by Kevin Fagan, followed by Jean Bakewell. Robbie Leibowitz will be after her and after Jean. And then whoever has the phone number of 25320 who doesn't have a name up on the screen, will ask you to be the 5th person following Robbie. And Kevin Fagan, would you like to join us for a couple of minutes?
Hi there. I get a kick out of seeing everyone's faces on it. Holly, Brian, David, and Jan. Long time. I'm into past my 40th year as a reporter now, and a lot of my career was at the time that this happened was spent on crime and disasters and whatnot. I just wanted to say that spending time with all of you for, Jesus, it must have been a couple of years over the, initially. And then, I did stories on Brian and David in the years after that. It inspired me, major focus of my journalism. And I've specialized in homelessness and among other things, but that's what I'm probably best known nationally for now. It has a lot to do with you guys. Spending time with you all and seeing the dedication that you had in your hearts and in your actions really inspired me as a human being and a journalist. I was at the Oakland Tribune back then, and the Chronicle, and done a lot of stories at the Chronicle on several of you folks here. And I see Holly nodding. I'm just really pleased to see all of you. And I'm a little amazed that so much time has gone by. It doesn't feel like we're that old. And we will be older, I think, later. But it's just wanted to say some gratitude to this all here, because you're all pretty terrific people. And I thank you for letting me write about you.
Thank you so much for being with us, Kevin. Jean, would you like to share? And if we could have the screen share be turned off, that would be great. From Terry, could you turn off your screen share, please? Thank you.
Sure, who's next?
Robbie, welcome to the table.
Thank you so much. It's great. I don't have a computer. I don't have a car. I don't have a cell phone, but I am very glad to be with you all. I feel you and hear you, and very moved by this gathering, and very thankful for those of you who put it together. And it's exciting to know that everybody's there that I hung out with for those couple of years off and on at the tracks, and it was a very inspiring those years. I left and I'm back now for 11 years in Santa Cruz, but during those years I got involved with 5888, who had come out against Reagan Central American policies, and were very involved with getting this action going. And I figured if they thought that Nicaragua looked like Vietnam, they had some reason for saying that. So helping with that and going to the tracks whenever I could. And it was quite an action. It just felt magical in a way. I mean, it just felt right to be there, and inspired. Well, there was a white dove living with us at the tracks for quite a while, and a solar oven. I mean, it was more than, it was peace in so many ways, being there. And it inspired a song, Dream for Peace, that I wrote, the concert at 5, if that's still on the schedule, which is on one of my CDs, Singing on a Rainbow. And it inspired a painting that I actually gave to Dorothy Granada when she was visiting from Nicaragua at one point. It was, anyway, nice that all of you are there. And I just continue my work in different ways. There's a veteran hall that we sing in front of the Vets Hall once a week, songs from World War II, and I'm part of that. And we just sang at Ruben Gomez's memorial. I guess a lot of you knew Ruben, or maybe many of you didn't. He didn't come to the tracks much, but he was the chaplain of the 5888 post. And Steve and Laura, we're still involved. We're called the Green Star family, and so we're still continuing with peace in that way, music, and that's basically a lot of what I've been doing all my life. We know one of the people from the Tin Can Band is in a band that I have called Robbie and Friends. There's 7 of us, and we do uplifting folk music, quite a few gigs every month at senior centers and public events and vigils and whatever, different public concerts and such. And we get to rehearse during the COVID because luckily our house where I live has a large yard, so 7 of us get to rehearse together, and we have one gig, a large enough yard to have outdoor 6 foot apart entertainment. So at least we have one gig a month, but it's so that's kind of what I've been continuing that, and with the Tin Can Band and other activities that basically a lot of things during this COVID, or with friends at the beach with Dance Church, and get to just by phone with my Buddhist group, Thich Nhat Hanh Buddhist group, once a week, and just by phone, of course. But anyway, and have a wonderful garden that keeps me sane. Just made some tomato sauce. The vegetables don't seem to mind the COVID or the smoke. So I'm thankful.
So thanks so much.
Okay, great.
And I'm coming down
Thank
for
you
dinner
so
out of your
much.
garden. Uh, so can we
Okay.
welcome, thank you so much, Robbie, and we'll look forward to hearing your music later. Can we welcome area code 213-413-5320?
You're
Great.
talking to. Yeah. I'm a dinosaur when it comes to technology, and I can't see anything on this phone, and nobody's name, nothing. But I'm
And we're
here.
thrilled.
Thank you.
That's Ellen
So
Earth.
it's great. Yeah. Who's that? Sounds familiar.
That's Mark and Sherry.
Oh, hi, Mark. Yeah. Besides not being in technology, I'm terrible with names. Waiting to the FBI. Well,
Well,
that's it. So
Yeah.
I am in downtown LA, and I don't know one day from the other what I've been doing. So we were down here. We had the National Guard down here when the police were having a fit, and so what of my work has been kind of with the Black movement and with my concern, and I've been working with that. So what can I say? I'm in downtown LA. I can't see anybody, but I'm here. Are you there?
We sure are, and we're thrilled you're with us. Thank you so much. I knew it was a challenge for you to sign on. So we'll have 5 more in the queue. The next person will be Mary Jane.
Oh, great.
And
Good. Mary Jane.
So I was at Holly and Brian's wedding, and I ate dinner with Holly and Brian and Gabe with my boyfriend Steve in their apartment in San Rafael. The night before, Brian was going to protest at the train, explained how he had sent a letter to the head of the weapons station warning how Brian planned to sit on the tracks to stop the train from sending weapons being sent to Central America. I was at work that day, and when I heard the news that the train actually ran over Brian instead of stopping, I was horrified, and so were others. The next day, thousands of people came to Concord and tore up the tracks. Sometime later, after Brian was released from the flat in the Haight-Ashbury area of San Francisco, near where they lived, and to become their office manager for Brian's new project, the Institute for the Practice of Nonviolence. I leased the apartment, promptly quit my job of 8 years and moved in the flat, where for a year we sent working teams to help people in Central America. I'm project, including me. Before this project dissolved, Tony Gonzalez, head of the International Indian Treaty Council at that time, and now head of AIM West, took over the lease. It's been a long time, but a few things that stand out in my memory from Nuremberg actions are being arrested at the tracks, along with others, handcuffed, taken to jail, and printed and provided up for being released. I remember spending many hours with the other protesters at the tracks and the many, many long Nuremberg action meetings. I remember the person, was his name Peter, who lived at the Peace House, who became very upset at times at what he was overhearing being said at our meetings. And he was a very emotional, very trash outside the Peace House. I would like to update you on a couple of my friends. One is Ellen Earth. Ellen said, we talked recently, Ellen said that she recalled her horror of picking up Brian's foot. Ellen said she would try to call in, and I'm glad she did, to this meeting. And then there's Sydney Valine, who said that after being hospitalized for months now during the coronavirus due to her breathing issues. Myself, I'm in a place where we have, I'm in a place in Northern California where we don't have very many things to protest here, even though a lot of things are going bad here. But there is I am able to participate somewhat by things about the BLM movement. And I'm currently studying a book, A You in White Supremacy. We do that weekly. Otherwise, I'm sheltering in place due to the pandemic. That's it.
Thank you,
Hi,
Firewalker Woman. So good to have you on. And Marilia, would you questions? Mark, can you see Marilia Kelly?
Am I unmuted now?
There you go, Marilia. Good
I'm
to see you.
join you for real now. Mary Leah Kelly, Executive Director of Tri-Valley Cares, which stands for Communities Against a Radioactive Environment here in the nation. When I participated in the demonstrations at Concord, I want to quickly bring in one of our Tri-Valley Cares members who we shared with Nuremberg Actions, who just recently, very recently passed from cancer, Barry Miller Presente. And I talked today with his wife, Barbara, and she's thrilled that we're getting together. It was very, very nice. I kind of met you all at a demonstration when you were kind enough to invite me to speak. It was one of my very early speaking engagements when Tri-Valley Cares, being represented by Western States Legal Foundation, who I see also on this call, actually sued the US Department of Energy for environmental law violations at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, which, as you all know, is one of your weapons. They are still at it. And so we in Tri-Valley Cares are still at it. I always called our litigation speaking truth to power in a language that power understands. We were successful, and we have sued them often since. We also, as you know, do demonstrations. We have a newsletter. We have an electronic news monitor. Livermore Lab, and more broadly, we continue to monitor US nuclear weapons and work for global nuclear disarmament and that intersection of peace, justice, and the environment. Anyone who would like to get electronic newsletters or the paper newsletter can contact us through the web or through me, and be happy to do that. I've seen you at Concord, I've seen you at Livermore, I've seen you at the Nevada test site. Thank you all for being such long-standing, wonderful, and faithful warriors for peace, justice, and for a healthy future and environment for all.
Thank you, Marilia. And before we welcome Chuck Goodmacher, now called Charles, I wanted to, together over the last 4 months, we've discovered that about 48 or 49 of our community have passed. And so when you get to the new website, which we'll be talking about in a little bit, there'll be a Presente list, naming and giving the names of those that we've discovered that are no longer with us. So if you have some of those, please do send it into the Nuremberg Actions at gmail.com link you got today, and we'll mention that again, but we would like to remember and record those of our group that have passed. We welcome Chuck.
Hi, it's wow, it's fantastic to be on this and see so many old friends and people that are just obviously live your whole lives dedicated to helping others and making the world better. You know, you all. And I just want to just a little bit about where I'm at now, and then circle back to Nuremberg. So I had kids late in life, so I now have a 13-year-old and 17-year-old, 2 daughters that are just wonderful human beings, and married to my wife Jill, and live here in New Mexico. So what you see behind me is a view from about a block or two. But okay, enough about me. Wanted to share, how do you do it? Nuremberg Actions t-shirt. which is not coming in very well, but says on the quote from Brian, "We are not worth more, they are not worth less." And that, you know, from the beginning when I heard Brian say that, really to the core of who we are as people. And I'm going to circle back to what I'm doing now that's kind of inspired by that. But I have to say, it's a strange coincidence, nice coincidence, that lately I have been going through old stuff I have in boxes to see what I can clear out. I decided to start digitizing a lot of some of these old papers, and just sent yesterday and today probably 20 or 30 separate emails with different scans of different old newspaper articles and such. One of these, oh gosh, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Not very good at this, but Contra Costa Times, an editorial or op-ed that I wrote about why protesters are demonstrating at the tracks now in the midst of writing an op-ed along those same lines about Black Lives Matter and everything else going on. It is the same story, isn't it? You know, we're not worth more, they're not worth less. And protesting itself has to be defended. I don't know. Also, by the way, I also had the recording of the press conference that Brian and Holly did, and I bought a little thing to digitize that, so I'm going to send that audio file to the website too. Of course, I'm also remembering Holly and Brian and I being able to go to Korea. I forget what year it was now, but that was quite a trip to North Korea at the time. You know, I've spent most of my years I worked as a union organizer for National Education Association educators, and they're again the same thing about we're not worth more, they're not worth less when you're talking about, you know, employees, workers, but also more recently been working on equity issues in education and transforming education so that you know, the core principles, Supreme Court ruling in New Mexico around a lawsuit around it, established the critical principle that's related to we're not worth more, they're not worth less around equity in education, that it is essentially saying it's right and just, to borrow a phrase from the Catholics, to provide equal opportunity, more help for some who need it, to get them on a level playing field so that everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed. And I think, you know, allowing the people of Nicaragua to have the same opportunities that we would want for ourselves. So I don't know. I've lived most of my life organizing one way or another since those old days when I worked at the Peace Center and worked with you all. And I'm just so grateful for the experiences I've had with you all and today's as well.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And
hey, Sherry,
yes.
I need to cut in because I have Sydney on the line and she can't stay long. Sydney, will you say hello to everybody?
Hello to everybody. That's
everybody.
Sydney. Everybody.
Sydney, we wish you could see the 1,000 smiles we're sending you.
Yet I can see them. I know what they look like up there.
Well, we love you, Sydney. We're glad to have you join us even for just this minute. Her arm is hurting because she's holding this phone up to her ear.
That's right. It's almost pulling up my ear right now.
Yeah. So you can say hello to Holly and to Brian and to David, to all the rest of us.
Absolutely, yeah. Brian, David, Holly, I don't know who all you named, but everybody you named, I'll say hello to. And everybody else that you didn't name, I'll say hello to.
When I got Sydney on the phone at the hospital, I asked her how she was, and she said, "I'm doing great, you're on the phone." So that spirit that you brought to the tracks continues. Yes.
That's right.
All right, thank you, Sydney.
I'm going to hand the phone back to somebody now because my arm is getting tired.
Thank you. Okay, take good care. We'd like to welcome Peace House. It's listed as Peace House, but while you find it, can you unmute Bob LaSalle?
He's already unmuted.
Fine. Great, Bob. Welcome to the table.
Hello, everybody. I just want to send love and humble thanks for your lives, for your lives and all the goodness. Some will remember that Francisco and I in those days were living at the Catholic Worker. I'm still there all these years. And during those days, I crossed a migrant over the border. And I thought my future wife and I did it. And we thought we were pretty cool about doing that. And we got over the border and we got home. And the migrant, who's a dear friend of ours, and we witnessed her wedding, and their kids are part of our family, and we're still very close. She said to us, "You know, Bob, I'm so close." Like, well, wait a minute, we did it. And then she, no, you just cooperated. And that's what I want to say to us and to each of you. Thank you for cooperating with the higher power, the universe, the earth, whatever it is, in doing this work. And it's carried me through life, honestly. And I've stayed in that stream. Holly said, she was remembering your vows, and I was there too. Today was, I'm willing to confront death. That jumped out to me. But I will just say, and this is just my personal take, I think we all learned how precious life is. Brian, that you survived. We were so grateful that you survived. And I always felt, and you can just put this on me, Brian, I always felt you were more whole after than you were before. You and I spent a lot of months together getting ready for this action, and you always seemed over than before. And I think all of us appreciated your life, and I think we all learned to appreciate our lives. And that's the main thing I want to say. Shortly after the attack, Sherry and I were asked to lead a delegation of vets to El Salvador, and Sherry and I told some stories to each other the other day. There were many stories, secret radios being snuck into the country past agents and all kinds of stuff that many of you will remember. About a year and a half later, the Jesuits were murdered in El Salvador, and they chose me to tell their story. And I had the privilege of going inside that story and being the one that was chosen to tell it in English, at least. And I think the reason why that door opened to me was in part because of Brian's courage and all of your courage, because they said, oh, he's a part of that. He's okay. We trust. And I've never been the star of any of these stories, and I really don't want to be or need to be. But the privilege of being there with you has just changed my life. And my children have had that privilege too. And I just can't tell you how grateful I am and how humbled I am. And I just have tried to let the current carry me in this road of solidarity and love. So that's all I want to say. Thank you. Bless you. It's great to be with you.
Dan Ellsberg, would you like to come forward and join us and share some thoughts with us today?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, Dan, thanks so much for being here.
Well, it's wonderful to have a feeling here when we're socially isolated, be reunited for Patricia and I. People who share these commitments and these actions are, I feel, is very much as close as family and always have. I'll never forget, with Patricia and I sat on the tracks in the morning, the day after we'd heard this astonishing news that Brian had sacrificed his legs, actually, to a principle, which I'll come back to in a moment. I remember we sat on those tracks and saw them been removed or rained out or scrubbed out or anything. I remember Patricia saying, sacrifice makes sacred. And that isn't all entirely a good memory for humans. Human sacrifice, animal sacrifice, part of sacredness, no doubt. But there was no question in my mind that those tracks with that blood on it represented something very, very powerful. The days before that incident, Brian and she had made vows together that already expressed this principle that so startled me, really, in its unfamiliarity, that I'd heard from Brian later in his letter to the base, that other people are as valuable, as she put it, I think, in that vow, as valuable as ourselves. And after all, isn't our Declaration of Independence the old man, as it was then, not women, but all men are created equal? Well, what we've learned, of course, in above all, I would say in the last several years since Charlottesville, and what's been going on in this country, is that the extreme hypocrisy of that statement written, drafted by a slaveholder, that it is simply absurd to actually believed that all humans were created equal as the owner of many slaves. And of course, that was true of 11 of our first 15 presidents. So we've all learned, I'll just speak for myself, I've learned more in the last 3 years than I had in previous 85, that how deep racism is in every aspect of our society, in this society. While has been going on all that time. Well, when I read Brian's statement, which was, as somebody else just repeated here, the people of Central America, where these arms are being sent, their lives are not less valuable than our own. Ours are not more valuable. And amazingly, of course, that statement is made by a man who actually not only risked in his body that day, but actually astonishingly suffered the costs of that risk, and has lived his life ever since in recognition of that same value. In other words, never in a sense of regret or injustice that he should risk his body for the lives of others, but actually lived that to the hilt, absolutely to the hilt. And as I say, we all, I, like Brian, learned an example of the how far that differed from our actual actions in the world in Vietnam. His description of his seeing people we had bombed, a pound in a village in Vietnam, and his reaction to that was like actually that of Kurt Vonnegut, who flew into the town of Dresden and saw what British and Americans had done to that town in creating a firestorm there, a deliberate incineration of tens of thousands of civilians. And I once had the occasion to ask Vonnegut, the one time I met him, something about how he describes that in Slaughterhouse 5. He reminded me that he had said in the book that when he was of the Germans in Dresden, when that happened, he and his close friend, Bernard something, were passing the Statue of Liberty as they came back, and he said to his friend Bernard, "Well, what did you learn from all that?" And his friend said, "Never to trust anything our government said again." And he was referring to the belief that he held on to then, as most Americans, that none had the right of life, even in war, even no matter on which side, that indiscriminate bombing of non-combatants was wrong, was a sin, and we didn't do it. And if it happened, it was collateral damage. That was a lie. And of course, our foreign policy has been based, and this is what I've been fighting for half a century, on the notion that we have the right to prepare on Earth, man, woman, child. Now that we know of nuclear winter for the last 35 years, a few years before the Nuremberg action, and ever since then, the nuclear winter means that our own war plans, on which I worked earlier, in a capacity, when I was serving the empire, just as Brian was, and came to realize in Vietnam that that was not only threatening hundreds of millions of people, it's everyone. In short, now that one is almost like saying we are all equal. But prior, equal it's equal potential victims of U.S. action. And the fact that this mad and insane policy can persist is a challenge, let's say, to the nature of our country, our people, ourselves, our civilization, our society's time. As Gandhi said right after Hiroshima, he said, "What this has done to the soul of the destroyers is yet too early to see." Well, it's not too early to see now. these years later. And no one has done more than Brian in his writings and in his life to reveal what the pursuit of empire and the acceptance of empire by the public, not only our leaders, means in terms of our aggregation of Brian's principle there, which Holly had joined in a vow just earlier, that these lives matter, that they matter. We're now hearing that Black lives matter, and some people say, well, white lives matter too. Not in our history, not in Justice Tawney's position in the Dred Scott case that, as he put it, Negroes of the African race have no rights, that the white man is bound. The way we've acted, as Brian has shown, I think is better than almost anybody I can imagine. And as he discovered in his life and as I discovered. So his words have inspired me all that time, and his life has inspired me. And all of you who support him, as I say, our family whose lives matter to me and whose actions matter to me, and I thank you all.
Thanks for sharing in this moment. Next, we welcome Daniel Zwickle.
Hello, namaste. When I was cantor at St. Joseph the Worker, Bill O'Donnell's church, Father Bill's church, I would always begin the Mass with Namaste, the divine, to make grace divine within each and every one of you. My parents, as many of you know, some of you know, met on a civil rights march in 1943. Whatcom James Farmer Jr., among others, to protest Jim Crow from New York, Washington, D.C. At the age of 4, Banner was Committee for Nonviolent Action West from San Diego to Vallejo to call for nuclear disarmament. And here I am living in Vallejo, below these many years later. I remember some bitterly cold nights sitting around the table at the tracks. I remember, I believe it was the first anniversary. I had been responsible for the generator to run the sound system, ran out of gas, their van, we plugged into the van and were able to continue. I remember every Thursday, my father, and up until several months before he passed at the age of 96, every Thursday he would take the bus, put on his kimono and get his drum. Where's his drum? His drum. And beat it, chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo while blocking the munitions train and trucks. The annual Good Friday witness and interfaith worship service at Lawrenceville Moore Lab with music and sound system, and lately at the Crosses of Lafayette. That's it for 16 years. A number of you know I was cantor at Father Bill's church, composed a Mass, recorded it. I see I cannot post on chat, so I will send the links that I was going to post to Nuremberg Actions, the website there, so that you can access my Mass. I set up a special page on the peace tree. My father planted an olive tree next to the chapel on the base. When it was to be decommissioned, I managed to transplant it with Mike Kerr and Everett and Wes Nicholson transplanted it onto the campus of my church, part of my beloved community, Mount Diablo Unitarian Universalist Church in Walnut Creek. It was dedicated by Commander Owens as a tree of peace. Just wonderful to be part of this wonderful gathering. Again, namaste.
Thank you, Daniel, and presente to your parents who are a beloved part of our community. Wind, we welcome you to the table.
Hello, okay, hi. Most of you probably remember me as Wendy. Wind is a name that kind of descended upon me years. But I just want to share, before I'll tell a little bit about what's happened to me in 33 years, but before I do that, I just want to share some memories of the track. Greg Geddes is, for me, one of the most, important memory for me. And I was hoping he'd be here. Does anybody know
Yes, anyway, he's here.
We can go to that later. Mm-hmm. Oh, good. And I also remember foot traffic, it's just car traffic. And so we would be at the stop sign and we would have to like run over to the driver's side door for them to roll down their windows and give them. Anyway, I think that it made me the best leafleter in the whole wide world, because every time I leaflet, like at easy places and with lots of foot traffic, I do such a good job and people are like, wow, where did you learn how to leaflet? Like Concord Naval Weapons Station. And I just also want to mention the trailer that Bob LaSalle and Barbara Graves made on Sandy Hillard's property did. And the Franciscan Affinity Group, which I was part of, owned the trailer, and it was like a yoke around our neck for many years after. Anyway, but it is just so wonderful to see familiar faces, some not. You know, I think that we all kind of had our parts, but I wasn't there on the morning that Brian was attacked. Anyway, like most of you, I guess the most recent is, City College of San Francisco. The accreditation crisis that happened, I don't know if people are familiar with it, but about 8 years ago it started, and it was not about accreditation. It was a political attack on a public college, and it's part of the whole, okay, I know I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it's, you know, this whole right-wing agenda of downsizing public education, privatizing public assets. Of course, I lost because I lose most of the political battles I engage in, but of course I gain the hope and the friendships of people like you. Before City College, I was spending my summers in Palestine, and of course that's a really heavy situation. But I can't go back because, of course, eventually I got denied entry at the border, but I have a friend that I call I was kicked out in 2012, so 10 years, keep our fingers crossed. And I guess that's it for me.
Inshallah, Wind, I might go with you. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Anna Graves, welcome to the table.
I'm very honored to be here amongst you all. And this experience of all those years of the 80s, and whether it was the Livermore Action Group or later on I was on the staff of the Pledge of Resistance. I remember going out to the track, and I always carried my person who had the little kid on my back who would look over my shoulder, and people would just be very distracted trying to talk because this little kid's face was right there. That little kid is 37. They are the parent of 2 beautiful little kids that unfortunately Jim and I can only visit now via Zoom. But anyway, I think I've kept the idealism of those times, the suffering of those times with me. And we've gone on and on to so many things that we've worked on. I'm sure you all have. It feels that these days as if it's the worst. I don't know, it keeps getting worse in a way. But I know you're all there, and we're working with this country once again. Sorry I get so emotional talking about it. I'm really sorry. I don't know if I have a lot to say. I've been working on electoral things. I'm with Indivisible Berkeley. I've done a lot of electoral. I'm a canvasser. I've been a canvasser for years now, trying to change, trying to help with the democracy in the country. Has been with you all, you and the others subsequent years that have done work with. You make life real. You give my life meaning. And I love you all. And just as a final thing, I could say, I'm sure many of you remember a friend of mine, Maylee Scott. And she was becoming a President priest. And I said, Maylee, with me sometime. And she came, and it was a wonderful experience for her. And I think so many of you. She died, I can't remember exactly, 15, 20 years ago, long time ago, from cancer. I just wanted to say presente to Maylee, was such a dear long-term friend. And I know she was so helpful to so many people out on the track. So I think that's all.
Thank you, Anna. And she invite others who have lost friends in the beloved community of Nuremberg to please send in those names to, if they're not already on the list, to our Nuremberg Actions email. Welcome, Jennifer.
Every one of you just triggers so many memories that experiencing them all simultaneously is really amazing. I want to begin what I have to say just by honoring those who made this possible and brought us together today. And you've probably figured that out by now, but I just want to speak it out loud. Sherry has absolutely tirelessly tracked us all down and followed up leads, and the Heart Shows helped a great deal as well. And Mark Copeland has really dug into the media archives and made that piece of it work out. And he mastered some odd challenges of Zoom that we encountered And anybody that needed training, he trained them personally to be able to join us. So making that circle empowered that way is just awesome, and I'm very grateful. And Michael Kerr is the one who's going to keep us together in the future, because he's created this incredible website that many of us have dreamed about for 30 years, as well as being archival. So all of us can go there, share our stories, share images, make comments on what's already there. We're all getting a little old. Some of us don't remember names very well, so you can go and add them in the comments section. It's pretty great. Also, looking back on this experience, just want to acknowledge the 2,000 arrests that I documented there at the tracks. 2,000. And I have to say that Abe Zwickle, and thank you very much, about the website, I just always personally felt there's been a lot of attempts to try to write the definitive Nuremberg Actions book, and none of them ever really gelled. And I think, and I've said for years, that that's because this story and this cast of characters is just too big for one person to try to put it all together. And so now we speak for ourselves and put them on that website and send them to the email. And thank you, Michael, for making that possible. It's very exciting to me personally. As far as where I've been, the last I saw a lot of you was at the 25th anniversary at the tracks. And since then, I spent 7 years back in Vermont doing end of care life for 3 of my favorite relatives. And I moved 16. And a year ago, a little more than that now, I found my long-term dream, an affordable old dirt house. I'm living in so nobody has a clue when it was built. It's just a 6-room adobe home on an acre of irrigated land. And so I'm learning how to plaster, and once again, putting up solar panels and putting in a garden. And I'm planning to stick around. I've moved once a decade, and I didn't really share a lot in the past about one aspect of what my motives were for doing the work I did. And one of them is that my name father, John Olarana, gave me the job as a pretty young child to devote my energy to trying to interface between Indigenous people and Met. He was an Inupiat elder in northern Alaska in an island off the coast of Nome. And that is what took me initially to Nicaragua in January of 1987, when they were writing their constitution. And to be part of that, to experience that, to see the Native people were included in that process was a really incredible experience. And became Linder there, that's what then caused me to want to connect with Holly and Brian when they came back. I didn't know many people who shared that experience. By then, Ben had been killed, and I needed to speak to people who shared that in my heart. So that's what took me to meet you guys when you were speaking. That's what took me out to the tracks in June, and that's what brought me back on September 2nd. And it's also what Bakery Bus, when it went out to the Nevada test site a year or two later. And I had by that time seen a nuclear missile in the waterfront area being unloaded from a flatbed truck. And I had never really given nuclear issues a great deal of thought, but that really, really struck me to see that for myself. And so jumped on the bus. Sure, we'll go out here and bake 50 loaves of bread a day. I can help with that. And stayed for 20 years, Tony and other Native groups, focusing mainly on the intersection of their treaty rights and nuclear colonialism around the world. And that's a lot of what I did. I still, from Abiquiu, New Mexico, I still offer nonprofit support to a few different groups, some of which are still anti-nuclear around the country. And also for the Chiricahua Apache Nation, which is in the southwest corner. And on top of that, I would just words from Steve Brooks and Laura Hagen, because they weren't able to join us today. They're in housing in Hollister. Their home in Santa Cruz, for those of you who know them, their home in Davenport is still standing, but it's not livable at this time due to the amount of smoke there from the fires. And also because of all that ash in the air, they weren't able to. So they asked me to share greetings with all you guys, and particularly with Holly and Brian, and just wish everybody well and say they really wish that they could be here. I just thank you for being part of my day. And I really wish you all good health and strength through peace and Social Security if you need it in the coming times.
Thank you, Jennifer. And as we're welcoming Mark to the table, I want to maybe have us all give a moment of reflection to all those who are experience suffering and devastation in these horrible fires that are plaguing up and down California. We've had many people that have, not many, but we've had at least a half a dozen people that could not be on the call today because they had no communications, or they've lost their homes, or they're having to shelter elsewhere. So if we could just, as we welcome Mark Copeland to the table, to please
Hello, everybody.
Put out good thoughts to all those who are suffering.
This is the only shirt that I
Hi,
have
Mark.
remaining from Nuremberg Actions. Like Brian, I'm sure that happened to you, Brian. I gave away every shirt from the tracks in Nicaragua, one at a time, sometimes right off my back. And often that was when I was with Brian and Holly, and someone would say, I love that shirt. I came to the tracks as the media coordinator in my first professional media job. And what an experience that was. Living at the tracks for a year before I went off to Nicaragua for 3 years was so intense and so amazing in so many ways. And I want to share two experiences that I remember from that, specifically about the military. One night at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, a car pulled up 100 feet from where we were sleeping, and a bunch of GIs in civilian clothes got out, and we thought, oh crap, they're gonna beat the hell out of us. It's gonna happen. And they came up to us and they said, we've just been given orders and we don't believe what they're telling us that they mean. They'd been ordered to go to Iraq or wherever it was at the time. They were being ordered off to some war zone, and sat there at the tracks for over an hour talking to us and getting counsel from us on what they should do. It was such a beautiful moment. And there's so many moments like that that happened through the years at the tracks. That was so significant. Then there was another time that the train was about to come. They came out, they did their whole thing. The soldiers were lined up. The arrest had been made. The train was about to come. And I did what I was trained to do in the military myself. And I said, group 10, cut, about face. And each and every one of them did exactly what I told them to do. Because just like I was trained, that's how they were trained. Afterwards, well, as they turned, they pivoted, and you could see on their faces, oh, shit. Every one of them, to the last one, knew that they had just screwed up because they did not know who gave that order. Afterwards, the military came to me and the sheriff's department, and they said, we're really concerned. We could arrest you for that. And I said, I'm just not sure what penal code giving an order to troops would fall under. The point being, and I'm sharing that with you now, is that they were trained to follow orders, period, without thinking about them, without judging them, just doing it. And we really had a relationship with both the sheriffs and the military that was pretty beautiful. You can't be in community like that and not develop those relationships, especially as a vet. It was very easy. And we knew that those people that we dealt with had this task that they had. And the difference between then and now is that we're finding out that so many of the police and so many of the military actually are Nazis. They actually did enjoy the directions and the orders that they're given. And I like to believe that our belief in the people that we work with out there on the tracks every day was real, and that their hearts were true. They had a horrible task. One of the things that I heard someone had made a comment about Lieutenant Doug Sizemore is one of the people that are listed in our graveyard, in our memorial of people that we've lost. And they said, why would we mention him? The guy died of cancer, and we know why. right? Because he was at the Naval Weapons Station all the time. And the fact is that I think if we go back, we'll find more of those guys that were there all the time dying of cancer and those kind of things that is so significant and so real in what they do. I went from the tracks to Nicaragua, where I spent 3 years and did 32 documentaries in the time that I was there. Had my son, David, brought him back to the tracks. And I came back and I transferred my activism into public education and became the public information officer and the spokesperson for the Berkeley schools. And I like to, well, first off, there's about 8 of the people in this group that I've dealt with in the schools. Many people, so many people I would run across. Anna Graves, I would run into at the Berkeley Adult School, and it was like, oh my God, this is amazing, right? And I like to believe that the community in the Berkeley schools would say to you, Mark did not speak for the administration, he spoke for us. And that was the way that I played that role for many, many years. And I retired a couple of years ago early so that I could do work in Honduras. And I spent 5 times in Honduras last year. I've got 120 Facebook friends from Honduras. And I was supposed to be there in March, which got canceled. December's been canceled. And so we're looking again for a few months after that. But I've moved my work to Honduras and to Central America with the Share Foundation. And it's been really, really wonderful. I'm in Seattle, where we just drove 2 days to get here to hold our granddaughter, who's 2 months old, our first grandchild, from my wife Nellie's daughter, my stepdaughter Marisol, and my son David, who some of you have known. Brian and Holly met in Nicaragua. He's just recently married, and so we're looking for grandkids from that direction too. So that's where I'm at, and I just love seeing you all. And even on the phone, you guys all sound exactly the same. Love you.
Thank you, Mark. We've been joined by Martin Sheen, who'll be welcomed to the table after we have a few more shares. And so next we're going to welcome Larry and Esther.
So it's really great to see all you folks, and it really brings back a lot of memories, and especially the memories of the people that we used to go down there with here from Sonoma County. So I would like to bring up the memory of Woody and Arnie Schwartz. Arnie's still living, although not cognizant much. You know, of course, Ruth Hartso, who used to go down with us, and Betsy Eberhard, others who have also passed, who are not coming to mind right at the moment. But it's really great to see all you folks, and maybe one of these days we can all get together at the tracks when all this Corona stuff is over, because it would sure be great to, once we can give hugs to each other, to give hugs to each other. So.
Oh, and hugs to you, Max. I haven't seen you in a while, so I'm going to email you. Do you have the same email?
Susan Quinlan?
Okay, I guess I'm unmuted. I'm wondering who remembers this poster. This was my introduction to the action was in working with David Solnit and a whole committee that worked with Juana Alicia to come up with this design. And it's actually a sketch from a meal that so you've probably seen it there. And yeah, I just wanted to bring this forward and give my greetings to everyone. And I wish Stephanie Ryan were here. I associate her with the action and David and a whole bunch of people. Nice to be here with you all. And that's all I needed to say.
Thank you, Susan. Good to see you. Michael Kerr, could you join us in the circle?
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Mm-hmm.
That's so great to see everybody. I have the Nuremberg Action banner behind me, and yes, it's the real one. I've still been keeping it here, so it's safe and sound. I live at the Peace House that was Nuremberg Action's Peace House Support House, and I've done a lot of work. I wrote kind of a short story about how I came to the tracks and how I ended up purchasing a house that you can read about under my name. When I came to Nuremberg, I was recovering from a dark period in my life where my wife had passed away 2 years earlier, and my experience then at Nuremberg was one of my best times. So I came from the worst to the best. And I've been working on the website. It's been a lot of work, but I've really, really enjoyed it. And I'm just amazed at how great all of us are in our lives and what we've been doing. It's, you know, it's like a reward doing this work. I just want to mention Peace House after Scott Rutherford put up for sale. Well, Scott worked with me and we were able to go through Brian's attorney and make an agreement on the side, not using real estate, to allow me to purchase a house. And it also took the real kindness and everything of Maylee Scott and Robert Spitzer, who had personal loans for the house. And later I had a family and everything. I had a hard time paying them back. And I did pay them back their principals, but they let me pass on the interest, which had increased quite a bit. So I really appreciate all three of them, and they've all passed on now. But you know, I wouldn't have the Peace House without it. And it's, you know, you're all welcome to come and visit it. It's in Bay Point, and I'll post an address for it. El Salvador in '89. I stayed with a family there, and when I came back, they were people that in the community that were being put in jail, and the co-coordinator of the group had been disappeared, and several of them asked to come here, and I ended up going to Guatemala and we spent 2 weeks smuggling them into the country, four of them, and I now have a big Salvadorian family of relatives. I have 3 stepkids that are all grown and 3 grandkids. I'm doing fine. Everything's great for me. I have a good life, and I'm still active doing all kinds of things with the drone warfare. I get arrested at time, and I'm working with the Oscar Grant Committee on people that have been killed in their families, for people that have been killed by the police. So that's where I'm at. Oh, and the last thing is I'm a 9/11 truther. Nothing about 9/11, the government story, is true. Not one thing. And you can go to my website. I'll post it. Okay. Thank you.
I'm gonna I didn't see when I called out the last group, I forgot to mention Andres. So Laura Magnani, Andres Contreras, who's calling in from Guatemala, and then Carolyn Scar.
Wow, this is just incredible. It's just so inspirational. Thank you all who organized it for such a wonderful opportunity. I was feeling completely exhausted and thinking I maybe won't get on because, you know, we get to life happen, but I'm so glad that I did. And such an honor to be here and such an honor to see all of you. I guess the memory that came to me fastest when we were asked to conjure those up was being at the Lake Street house before the action. You know, and we were strategizing and advising and trying to get folks ready who were going to make that. I don't even know how I came to be in that particular meeting, but I'm feeling so honored and privileged to have been in that space and to have. So I wasn't at the tracks the day of, but certainly many days after, and I can remember, you know, cranking out those leaflets that we passed out on Fridays. It was the Tenderloin Reflection Center that cranked out a lot of those leaflets for back. I think one of the things that's so inspirational about this is the intersection of issues, you know, and where we've all gone in our lives, and how they cross over in so many incredible ways. You know, you probably know that most of my work has been on prison issues, and I've been with the American Friends Service Committee for 30 years, just about to retire at the end of this month. And I'm exhausted today because in the 70s, I was a lobbyist for the Friends in Sacramento. Violence was teaching me that I couldn't do something that made the sacrifice somebody else had to make the sacrifice. I had to be making the sacrifice myself. And of course, Brian's experience and all of our experiences ever since then have been about, that's what direct action is about, you know, and that's what nonviolence really is about. And so I thought I couldn't be doing legislative work and expecting legislators to take the risk. You know, I needed to be taking, and I say that because last night, in the last few days, I've been back doing legislation around prison issues. We had a bill that was supposed to put due process in the mix when prisoners were being accused of things through confidential information and kept in prison for years and years and years, which is what kept people in solitary confinement for decades. So I was back doing legislative work. I say this because last night, at the end of the legislative session, which constitutionally has to come to an end at midnight on the 31st of August, 10 minutes before midnight, they took up our bill in its last vote. And we became victims of a Trumpian strategy perpetrated by the handful of Republicans in the state legislature who were filibustering this bill and were being very, very cagey. And what they were trying to do was to run out the clock so that the bill would die. And all kinds of parliamentary procedures got pulled into play. It was just amazingly dramatic. And I was just left shaking and beside myself as this thing unfolded. And what I'm left with today is what I was left with in the 70s when I left that space. It's like, this is not played and power gets exerted and we're all the victims of it, in the midst of what's happening to us. And it's just such a marvelous thing to be with you all today after that completely unreal, surreal midnight, I don't do midnight at all, experience. And technically the bill passed. I mean, or was it after midnight? And how do you figure that out? And all these games were happening, but it doesn't really matter at this point if the bill passed, because other people will challenge it and take us to court, and the prisoners will still be the victims of this completely arbitrary exertion of power that's created by the gangs that run prisons. So it's just such a kind of a ball of that gets perpetrated on particularly people of color every single day. And I guess will continue to get perpetrated against guys inside prison if we can't make this decision stick. So thank you for still being here, and thank you for still being in this movement and making it happen. It gives me hope. I know it's where the hope is. And that's my thing.
Thank you, Laura, for reminding with giving each other strength after all this time. Andres, welcome from Guatemala.
It's a pleasure to be with all of you, and I too am grateful to those who planned this incredible reunion. If I'm not mistaken, I think I may be the only person who was part of the Nuremberg actions because there too, on September 1st, the fast would continue on the steps of the Capitol in 1987. It's what had begun a year earlier on September 1st, 1986, when 4 of the veterans, including Brian, who's here with us now, began that fast that ended up being 47 days on water only. And I was one of many supporters during that time. And a year when what happened at the tracks took place, I was at my office on Capitol Hill in the Methodist building, and the phone rang, and it was Rita Clark. And she gave me the news that what had just happened to Brian on the tracks there where many of you were. And I then walked over from the Methodist building to the steps of the Capitol where Charlie and George were. I looked like a ghost because of the news that I had to convey to them. And the plan had been the fast was going to continue there on the Capitol as well as at the Concord Naval Weapons Station. However, that completely changed, and we pretty much shut down the project on the East Coast. But that day is one that I will never forget. And of course, I did join many of the following months, which was a high honor to be with all of you. And Brian, I also want to just say thank you to you because I was allowed to be part of the Veterans Fast for Life in 1986. I ended up going with you and with George Mizo and Duncan Murphy and a bunch of others to Nicaragua after the fast ended in late October in 1986. And we were there in November, And it was my first trip to Nicaragua, which was very important. His cousin was the only Uruguayan volunteer in Nicaragua to be killed by the Contras. And I was able to visit his grave there in Managua on that trip when we went there in November of '86. So I have so many heartfelt memories of our time together during the fast and what happened after that. So I'm just really in awe to be celebrating and honoring that now. I want to close just by remembering the names of those who have passed will be posted, but I just want to call out 3, 4 of their names. And if you join me in saying presente. First, I'll start with my cousin. Marcos Conteris Iglesias.
Presente.
Presente. Duncan Murphy.
Presente.
George Mizo.
Presente.
Charlie.
Thank you, Andres. And Carolyn Scar, if you could join us for a couple of minutes, and then we'll welcome Martin Sheen.
I at the time of all the things at the tracks, I was working with Ecumenical Peace Institute, and I'm still working with Ecumenical Peace Letter, which just went to the printer, which will include reports from our fall gathering in which we talked about American exceptionalism, the doctrine of humanitarian intervention, which we've been doing all over the world, and killing people supposedly to protect them. And I also would like to say that we are very much involved in focusing on the realities of American imperialism. And so one of the things that connects me highly with the tracks is I don't think you can see this, but anyway, in 1988, we had a week-long peace pilgrimage between the Concord Naval Weapons Station and the Livermore Nuclear Lab. And so during Holy Week of 1988, 50 or so of us walked between those hands that were distracting me. And so we had a very good walk. It was very well received. We didn't have any trouble with the police back in those days. The police actually believed in the First Amendment, I think. We also had some interesting other experiences with the police, like the time that a teenager got arrested with us at Livermore, and Lieutenant Shepard didn't really want to, so he released her to my custody because he knew who I was, and I made arrangements for somebody to take her home. She was a child of divorced parents. Each of the parents thought she was with the other one when she sneaked out to go to Livermore. I would like, if we have another second or two, to share a poem with you. This is Vietnam. Wasted. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Speak my me, and am and smoked dope and lived wild and reckless. Your body is God's temple, my son. Repent and you are forgiven. Sin no more. In the towns, oh, it was wild. Many, many nights, I and my buddies, we slept with prostitutes. Children really, but whores just the same. And we slept with God forgives the repentant sinner, my son. Sin no more. There was, and some had got hurt real bad. This village, Father, and some of those gooks had to be calm, Father. They just had to be. We wasted them all, my buddies and me. We wasted them, old men and babies and women, and we burnt their straw shacks. Me and my buddies, we wasted the whole thing. And in the jungle, we caught this gook. He stood there skinny and shaking in his black pajamas and didn't say anything. My buddies held on to him, and he looked away and didn't say anything, just leaned away as far as he could. And I wasted him, Father, his brains and blood all over the place. I dreamed that blood, the smells and my rage and fear. Absolve me, Father, and let me be clean. The blood, oh God, the blood. There is no sin, my sin, but the blood, Father, no sin. Yes, this is not about it's about the failure of many churches at that time and now.
Thank you, Carolyn. That's a very powerful poem and difficult to step away from. I am joyful to welcome our friend Martin Sheen. Martin will be sharing with us for about 5 minutes, and then following Martin, we'll have a Hartso and Brian and Dan Ellsberg and Holly we'll have a longer conversation together. Many of you may remember conversations like this we've held in the past. And then our circle time together will be closed by David Hartsoe before we move into the music part of our program. So Martin, we are thrilled you could join us, and welcome.
Thank you very much. I was just having a conversation with my daughter, Renee, the first time I went there after Brian's attack, and she's here. She runs this whole electronic system for me. I don't have a computer. This is
Hi, Renee.
We've
been talking.
Sorry, going to make it happen. Sorry.
We've been doing a lot of stuff with Grace and Frankie on Zoom, and Renee sets it all up. I'm useless with computers. I'm just amazed that this works, and that we can have
you as well.
Sherry, it's good to see you. Yeah, I just heard you were in Iraq when I last heard
Afghanistan.
from you. I got a letter from
Afghanistan.
you.
Yeah, go there regularly.
Yeah.
And Louis sends his love to you.
How is he doing?
He has his days.
Yeah.
And he sends, yeah.
Okay.
He's aging, but still a warrior.
Yeah. Please give him my love, will you?
I will.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, Louis gave the eulogy funeral, and it was the most extraordinary eulogy. And afterwards, my wife Janet said, "Could we get a copy of that?" And Louis said, "No, I don't have a copy. I made it up as I was speaking." And I'll never forget that. But that comes from all of you. You all have witnessed that you don't have to go very far, and because you live it. And I was reminded of a demonstration that ended very very badly for all of us in jail, and I remember afterwards remarking to Dan as we were being released, "Well, who do you suppose we influenced today? You think we changed anyone's minds?" And Dan said, "The only one you can count on is yourself." I think that's a very fundamental kind of energy that we carry from I learned that we didn't do it because we thought we might influence someone else to come to our way of thinking or change their own way of thinking, or just to become more enlightened. We did it for ourselves because we could not do it. And that is still evident. I see, no matter how far we climb on the age ladder, that we're still involved and still active. And while, we know we're changing anyone's minds, I think that when you look at the streets today and these young people that are so involved in the Black Lives Matter and the social justice movement in the streets all over the country, and have been going on all summer, I think that there's some measure of our involvement 30 years ago, 35, 40 years ago, that is still alive and very, very important to young people, because have to fish very long for an answer to where were you when the war in El Salvador and Nicaragua and Guatemala was going on. And so I'm very proud and very delighted to see all of you, and sad to know so many have passed. Laura read that poem a little while ago, so powerful. And I wrote a little poem when I came back from Central America. Let me share it with you, just a 4-line poem. Jesus keeps a lore. There he weeps a pool residual. Guatemala, Nicaragua, and El Salvador. So all of us have this Nuremberg energy and this commitment to protest social justice, putting ourselves on the line, and we formed community, and we have a different image of ourselves thanks to each other, because we mirror each other, it seems to me. I'm very proud to see all of you again and to remember, and we're still there.
That's wonderful, Martin. And if you could have Renee send us the poem, we'll post it on the website, along with, many of you don't know that Martin did a section from Hamlet. He walked into the base on a day when the trains weren't running. And so he and many of you may have been with him carrying bread, walking down towards the ships. And so can you imagine being the soldiers that day who had to arrest Martin Sheen? Recite those and many of the other wonderful pieces that Mark took photographs, and many of you may have submitted photographs and are invited to, will be on the website, and we'd love to have the poem you just read too, Martin. Now I'd like to have Holly and Brian and Dan and David Hartsoe join in with Martin, and we turn it over to you all to have a conversation amongst your.
Well, I will ask a question that any or all of us could respond to. What do you see as the importance of Nuremberg actions, and what did we learn from that struggle for our lives and our work today? Any thoughts people would like to share?
It's a really good question, David. For me, what I learned on the tracks was truly the power of nonviolence, and it was foundational. I've been involved with many issues personally. I moved to Florida 15 years ago, and the day I got here was the day war was declared on Iraq. And I said, where are all the activists? I couldn't find them, so I went and stood on the little courthouse building downtown in Fort Myers all by myself with a sign. But the activists found me. And really, I think the commitment to this understanding that commitment needs to be really grounded in the truth of who we are is what I learned. Can't be violent in my as well. And the Black Lives Matter movement today, along with COVID happening simultaneously, is an incredible opportunity in this group. We're all white. And for us to do the work now of confronting in a loving, nonviolent way our own privilege, our own exceptionalism that we've had and that we've lived and we've enjoyed through our lives. Now is the time for me to apply that in a deeper way and do that personal work. So while I've stayed home during the COVID, reach out to many, many young activists here. They look up to me. I'm almost 70, but that's my answer, David, is that I have to walk it into a deeper place inside my own self personally, because a part of me is still violent, a part of me is still racist, a part of me still needs to get that they are not worth more, and we are not worth more, and they are not. There's no we or they. This othering is a real enemy. And so if we can not other, we can walk this. Hope that wasn't too long-winded, but.
Thank you, Holly. That was beautiful and powerful.
David, can I ask you a quick, was it to frame the action, this particular nonviolent resistance action, as a Nuremberg action, as a resistance by American citizens to unlawful orders? Who conceived of it that way?
Brian, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, Brian.
Well, I certainly knew that I was very cognizant of the Nuremberg principles. Who might have said Nuremberg actions? It might have been me. It might have been David. I had an uncle who was a young lieutenant investigator at the Nuremberg trial, and so I have always had kind of a special interest in Nuremberg because of my relative who worked there. He was actually an Army lieutenant, investigator with the chief prosecutor. I forgot who the court justice, Robert Jackson. But I don't know precisely when in our meetings we said Nuremberg actions, but it was certainly would have been on my mind. And
Brian, you said was it a relative of yours who was related to Justice Jackson in some way?
Well, I had an uncle who was a young Army lieutenant as an investigator.
You remember, I was very impressed at the time by Nuremberg, and when I was in the Marines, that was a very, very important principle. Jackson said, if these judgments that we're making here are not to be universal, if they're not to be applied to us as well, then it will be a mockery. That's a paraphrase. He did say that. And I took, actually, in retrospect, it was a mockery. There was never any intention of U.S., I think, to subject themselves either to international law or, which you've been so eloquent about, or the Nuremberg principle that illegal orders are to be disobeyed. You know, that's an extremely timely issue at this moment. Asked in public for the first time in my life, in your life, Brian's, I would say, any of us here, that it's a public debate right now, will, you know, blatantly give illegal orders, unconstitutional orders, and whether he will be obeyed in doing so. Our generals, the military, are being asked for the first time ever, if you get an order, rather specifically, not just an illegal order, but an illegal order, let's say, to keep you in office, even against the election, will you obey that order? And that order, that was asked in Trump's period about by the head of Strategic Air Command or Strategic Command. How about an order destroying a city, let's say, just, you know, in the morning, a tweet, instead of a tweet, the general gets a tweet, or there's a general tweet, I am ordering, you know, this city or that city to be destroyed. Would you obey it? And I think it was General Hyten is his name. He said, well, if it's an illegal order, I'll tell him, of course, that it's illegal. And we'll then discuss it and we'll think of some illegal. I'm not aware of a general in our history that an order was illegal. We obeyed. We were part of an illegal war. There were innumerable orders given during
the Nuremberg
yeah.
that was set up in 1945. It excluded trying any crimes by the Allies.
Oh.
It excluded any kind of account explicitly, and it excluded partly because the U.S. and European bombing of Germany was and then in Japan was much more pervasive than the German bombing of England.
Yeah.
They weren't going to put the bombing into the trial, and then of course that charter was signed on, I think, August days after the Hiroshima bombing and one day before the Nagasaki bombing, which weren't even thought of as part of Nuremberg.
Right. Well, when I asked David that question, it's in mind of the fact that we're in a minority, all of us people on this broadcast, not just you and I, in a minority, I think, who take that notion seriously, that there are obligations that go beyond orders by authorities. Mm-hmm. Immediate authorities. Herb with Roper poles and discovered Kelly was convicted of killing, actually, he was in charge of killing over 500 Vietnamese. Actually, they were called, I think, Oriental human beings who clearly, you know, did they or did they not matter as much as us? Well, clearly not in his practice. So they found that most Americans did not believe Kelly. Then they asked another question, which amazed me even more. The same proportion, about 67%, said Nazis should not have been tried for that. Obeying orders is what they should have done. I was astonished at that. I'll bet a lot of people hearing me say that can't believe that I could be right. But if you look up Herb Kelman's Crimes of Authority, it's called, or I'm sure you can find it on the web. You can, starting Brian, your point that these people's lives matter as much as ours. When, you know, the practice is, if they're enemies, if they're Oriental, they don't matter at all, you know, and in between there. We're in a minority, and I think we have to recognize that, but it's not a small number of people. We certainly are enough to, if we act with commitment, like so many people, as I know, on this, we have enough people to matter, to make a difference.
I mean, I saw yesterday that Trump has 85,000 or 850,000 likes on followers on Instagram. It would have been 85 million followers on Instagram. And almost all my boyhood friends that I grew up with, who are a year younger, they're all Trumpians that have AR-15s.
I've never met one. I'm bubble here. I don't think I know a Trump voter or that I've met one consciously, but there they are. We have to recognize and remember, they are human too. Just racists aren't human. is to
White supremacy is at the end. I mean, in a way, we now know that we've been a white supremacy police state for blacks, Indians, poor whites, and women from our beginning. And most of us grew up after World War II when we had this glory period where we took credit for defeating the Nazis when really the Russians are much more significant in that role. And we had a consumer society until Reagan. So those of us that were in formidable years between 1945 and 1980, as well, you know, we wouldn't have had any idea of how terrible it was for everybody else.
That's right.
And historically. And by the way, when you talk about the memories from September 1st, I don't have any.
That's a blessing, Brian.
I don't have any memory. And, it's still, and they said I would certainly have epilepsy, and I haven't had one yet. So it's amazing that I don't remember anything. But
Not even before. You don't remember before the attack?
Well, I remember, I think the last thing I remember was when a state policeman came to our little vigil around 10:45 in the morning. Said, you know, a train can't stop very easily. And we said, well, it's only a 5-mile-an-hour train, and they can't run, they can't live. I mean, they know they can't run that munitions train with anything on the track. But that's, Holly might remember that. I have a vague memory of a state policeman coming by in his car saying, you know, the train can't stop very fast. You remember that, Holly?
I do remember it. Yeah. I'm surprised that you remember that, Brian.
Really stays in my memory.
Especially when it's gathering speed as it approaches you.
We had a discussion with all of those authorities about being arrested before running the train, and that is totally what was expected, even with the people.
It was inconceivable that they did what they did. It wasn't conceivable.
They were playing chicken, Brian, and it occurred to me that's what the nuclear era has been, playing chicken with, and we've done it in Crisis in 1983, and in a lot of the cases, we're saying, you better give way or we'll blow the world up. That's our foreign policy. And that's what the train didn't stop. They didn't, I don't believe they meant to run over you. They thought you'd jump away.
There was no time.
They've got to, we can go ahead forward because those people, they're rational, they're human. They've got to jump away. And they were wrong.
Well, in the hearings before the Congressional Committee, the study for what happened on September 1st, it took him a month, but on October 2nd, I think he issued the study. And in the study, and then he also testified before the committee that they knew that Brian was a very serious activist because he'd been involved in the fast the year before. So they must have known that I wasn't just, I wasn't a flake.
But there are limits, so, right?
Well, I think this was, we have a war to fight, and you folks better get out of the way. And to terrorize us into saying, well, it's immoral and it's illegal by international law, et cetera, but we better get out of the way.
Reagan had issued some executive orders too about, they were pretty explicit about not restrained in investigating.
He had already ended up on a domestic terrorist list put together by Oliver North because he fasted on the steps of the Capitol the year before that.
Jack Ryan.
Right. We found that out from Jack Ryan. I wanted to say something really quick to Daniel Ellsberg. Dan, it's so good to see you. I want to say that you've inspired some people in ways you might never know. There's a big whistleblower. He has told many, many, many lies about how many cases of COVID there are. And she was working for the Department of Health at the highest level, doing the geo-tracking of all of the COVID cases. And she was fired by Governor DeSantis. And so she's created a new tracking system, not only for COVID in the state of Florida, everybody's following it, but now she's doing it for the whole nation, for all the schools opening up.
There's no reason to think that she had me in mind. How old is she? Do you have any idea?
She's a baby. She's probably about 30.
I saw her on CNN.
But she knows who you are, and she's a courageous woman, and she's taken courage
Well,
from
that's,
people like you that have been willing to tell the truth in the face
and you
of
know, I'd forgotten, Brian, that, you know, one of
blind government.
nations was on that fast and on the Capitol, where you did it for a long time. I did it for the last 13 days. And that was a very impressive move for me. But, you know, in terms of how we can make a change, something flashed in my mind. I'll tell you this fast of another train story, basically. When Richard Nixon was secretly, I was copying the Pentagon Papers, but not in the September of 1969, believing that eventually this war would go to a point where it would use factor in my mind, but not that it would happen anytime soon. I did not. I thought it would be years, maybe in his second term or something. But at that very time, he had made threats to North Vietnamese through the Russians and the Chinese that he was prepared to use nuclear weapons. That was his madman theory. And he said Ho Chi Minh will be in Paris right away, you know, as soon as you give him this threat. So at one point, and this is in October of September, October of, he had Kissinger have a meeting with Dobrynin, the Russian ambassador. And he had arranged beforehand that he would call Kissinger during that meeting with Dobrynin, the ambassador, and to underline these threats of nuclear weapons, that he would use nuclear weapons. And the plans had been made. Roger Morris, who was working for Kissinger, saw the nuclear targets.
Operation Duck something?
What's that? Duck Hook, right.
Duck Hook, yeah.
Secret. I knew nothing about it, and it was secret for years. And Morris later told me when he resigned over Cambodia the next spring, he said the greatest shame and regret of his life was that when he and 4 others resigned from the NSC over the invasion, they did not take documents with them, and specifically this target folder that he'd seen. And he said, we should have thrown open the safe since it was. Well, going back though, the plans were not carried out, and for this reason. Nixon calls Kissinger during the meeting with Dobrynin, as arranged, and it's not on speaker. Kissinger puts the phone down. He says to Dobrynin, the president once said to me that he wants me to tell you the train has left the station and it's moving down the tracks, meaning our inexorable toward using nuclear weapons is on the tracks. So Dobrynin says to him, I hope he meant the train could turn around. And Kissinger then says, as prearranged, no, he chooses his words very carefully, and he said train. Well, the train was turned around because on October 15th, which is weeks before the president was going to make this announcement, there were 2 general strike, but they chose not to call it a general strike. It was during the week, a work day, a student day. And so somebody said, no, it's too provocative and too left-wing to call it a general strike, as in San Francisco. We'll call it a moratorium, like a bank moratorium, not business as usual. So they counted people who were at the same time all over the country, 10 here, 100 there, 10,000 in New York, 2,000 here, this one, and it added up because it was the same day, not to a 10,000 person day, and in San Francisco on November 15th, when they did the same thing during a week, and it added up to 2 million people. And the president says, I knew that my threat had failed, especially just before the November one. He said, I knew on October 15th, my threat had failed. The North Vietnamese would never believe that even if I carried out a nuclear attack, that I could keep it going because there'd be so much protest. So the people who just beginning those took a day off, postponed nuclear war by, since 1969. And frankly, we're facing situations right now, despite the pandemic. I said to people, some of these things are worth a general strike, but how can you do it during a pandemic? You can't do it. Well, amazingly enough, they went out there. I felt uneasy at all these crowds, brushing each other, the Black Lives Matter, George Floyd and everything. I said, geez, this is a pandemic. And I don't know, that's
Thank you, Dan.
challenge.
Unfortunately, we are near the end of our time, but it's just been a brilliant conversation and probably go on for hours. But I'm going to ask each one of the participants to maybe close with some final thoughts. And then David, if you could close our session together, that would be wonderful. So Brian, did you want to say a few?
I just want to say that one of the today I was honored by the Nicaraguan National Assembly. I spoke before the entire National Assembly because they wanted to honor me for having inspired Nicaraguans to resist the Contra War and the new plans to overthrow the government. So they were talking about what happened 33 years ago to me that was inspiring them still.
Martin, would you like to have some closing comments with us?
Well, sure. Two things. One, Dan, what Holly said about you being an inspiration for the young lady in Florida goes for literally hundreds of thousands of people through our society, and more are becoming aware of the first and most important wish that it is just incredible that when you think about it today, how you get then is even more impressive. And I happen to be very close to your family, as you know, and they were all, affected by your decision, but changed by all of our lives were changed. The life of the nation was changed, and so you deserve that recognition. And secondly, Brian, your action. I think for me, one of the most important and the most impressive was your forgiveness of the driver of that train that day. We heard that he was deeply affected emotionally and spiritually and psychologically, and he was encouraged to go on, that he'd done his job, but he was devastated by it. And you made all the difference by not only forgiving him, but assuring him. Between the two of you, the Sermon on the Mount was realized in the Nuremberg action. So I'm terribly proud and happy and grateful to you two in particular. Thank you.
Hey, Martin. Holly, do you have a few closing words for us?
Sure. I'm really moved by what you just said, Martin, and remembering that is part of the lesson of the Hawaiians call it Ho'oponopono. And I just want to thank every single one of you for showing up today and for showing up wherever you show up in the name of justice, in the name of Black Lives Matter, in the name of all that is sacred. And the rights of nature is a movement that I would like to ask to blossom and emerge in this country, where instead of giving corporate personhood to corporations, we need to allow our rivers and our trees and our waterways to have rights. And so just thought I had to mention the rights of nature before saying goodbye to you all today. And I really want to stay in touch because you truly are beloved community, every single one of you. And we're still in community after all these years. Like Ken, Michael Kroll, oh my God, I can't believe I'm looking at you, all of you. So let's stay in touch. I want to thank all the hosts, Sherry, Mark, awesome. I will participate in the website. Max, I see your smile. I just feel all of your love and I send it back 100%. And isn't it awesome that Brian and I have been able to stay friends for 33 years. I consider him one of my deepest, best friends together.
Thank you, Holly. And before I invite David to give your thoughts and also close our circle, that would be deeply appreciated. And from all of us on the coordinating committee or the gathering community who have shared 30 years of memories with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Sherry, and thank you, all of you, for being here. It's so many beautiful, many of us look a little bit older, but it's still beautiful. And to me, the profound thing about Nuremberg actions, I think we all internalized Brian's more, their lives are not worth less. And we not only put our own bodies in the way of those trains carrying bombs and munitions to kill our brothers and sisters in Central America, but we have, I think probably all of us have spent our lives ever since trying to build that beloved community, not only where we are, but with people all over the world. First day of my life, being right next to Brian as he got run over And as I was knocked over, and because I had my arms out over the tracks, yelling at the guys on the train that there are people on the tracks, please stop. They knocked me down. And when I looked underneath the wheels of the train, here was Brian getting Nuremberg. And so that was the worst day of my life. But it was also the best day of my life because Brian did not die. It was thought there was no chance at all that he could live. And he not only lived, he's still with us. And he has spent his life trying to speak truth to the madness of war and killing and imperialism. Beautiful day of my life was there on the tracks after Brian had been run over and he'd finally been taken off to the hospital. I think we were all in despair. Here we came to try to say to our country, madness has to stop. And here they have killed our dear brother, Brian. And somehow, and Ken Budigan played an important role in this, that horror transferred to continue the struggle. And it was similar to John Lewis during the Freedom Rides, when CORE gave up, the Freedom Rides, and John Lewis and the folks in Nashville said, no, that will give the Ku Klux Klan and the white racists the idea that if you use some violence, these people quit. Continued for 2.5 years, blocking every train carrying bombs from Concord Naval Weapons. And many of our group were out there sleeping on the tracks to make sure that they did not bring trains through at night. That's a phenomenal act and example for the world of what sustained nonviolent resistance really means. When I went to El Salvador and Nicaragua, just where there was no radio and no newspaper or television set, people had heard about Brian Wilson, about Concord Naval Weapons Station, who were blocking trains, trying to stop the killing of their family members and the people in their communities. And we're so deeply touched. So that's another great, I think, success we had, is these people who tragically being killed were, found hope that there were Americans that cared deeply enough to actually put their own lives on the line to try to stop that madness. I was inspired that there were 30 or so groups. Somebody mentioned Maylie Scott, but the Buddhists, the Quakers, the various, who each came one day a month. And so we really had a significant group of people there on an ongoing basis. And I can remember sometimes they would have to arrest 2 busloads of us before they could bring the trains through. And that was so inspiring. And I remember one day I was in one of these buses totally, and they were getting ready to take us off to jail. And here another train started coming through, and there was a guard at the front of the bus. So we couldn't get out that way. But on the back of the bus is on the door, it says, for emergency use only. And Diane Poole said, well, I guess that's meant for us. So she went up in her handcuffs and turned around and opened the door and went out. Well, that was the kind of commitment that we had. And we were really building the beloved community, not only among ourselves, but feeling really the whole world is part of our beloved community, and that's what's sustaining us. One of my joys was that my mom and dad came down from Concord Naval Weapons Station. 3 of us got arrested together, and my dad has a very radical sign. It says, love one another. And I think you folks know that's a very radical sign. It's almost as radical as our lives do not worth more, their lives do not worth less. But anyway, so we were all arrested together before they brought that train by. And that was one of the highlights of and he had Parkinson's disease. were kneeling between the tracks, and we could see a train was approaching, and Lieutenant Sizemore came up, and he saw my dad, and we'd gotten up to stand up between the tracks facing the train. And Sizemore said, with a very worried look on his face, he's not going to get married. He's not going to more. I'm not going to arrest him. That's up to you. And it touched me, the kind of human relationship we were able to have with Lieutenant Sizemore and the other sheriffs. They were not the enemy. They were carrying out orders. The day that in November of 1987, I don't know how many of you were there, almost every day that month, the government had tried first his legs. Then in November, they essentially used terror every day to try to get us off the tracks. As I was kneeling there one day, the sheriffs came up, took my arm, and began twisting. And when it got so painful, I got up to start walking with the sheriff to the, as we walked, after about 15 feet, he gave it another twist of his arm and said, "This is to make sure you get off the tracks next time." And I passed out into unconsciousness, and my arm had been broken along with David Wiley that day. But I remember when I came to, lying in the mud puddle, looking up, here was Dan Ellsberg's face, and I felt so comforted. Thank you, Dan, and Patricia, for being there that day. Well, there's just all kinds of stories I could share. I wrote a book about my life called Waging Peace, Global Adventures of a Lifelong Activist. And I had a whole chapter in here on Nuremberg actions. And about Nuremberg actions is on the on the peaceworkersus.org website. And I think it will also be on the Nuremberg Actions website. But people might want to look at that for a bunch of the stories from our time together in Nuremberg. And as a present, I would like anybody that doesn't already have my book, if anybody would like a copy of this book, I can, and you were involved in Nuremberg actions, I will contribute one to. Jan and I had two kids that were quite little during Concord Day. Sometimes embarrassing for them when they would, in school, people would ask, well, what does your dad do? And they'd have to say, my dad is in jail. But our kids now are married, and each of them have two kids, so we have 4 grandkids. Our home, which we had the joy of for 3 or 4 years, our daughter and her family now live, and we're still living the same place in the Haight. In terms of what I've been doing, I've been involved in nonviolent movements and struggles most of my life, and I co-founded the Nonviolent Peace Force, which has over 200 people doing accompaniment in war zones of civilians, similar to when I've more recently started World Beyond War, which has close to 100,000 people all over the world that are working to try to end war. And any of you who do not already know about it, check out the website worldbeyondwar.org. Together with Dan Ellsberg and others, I've started an appeal to free, and I'll try to put that on our website too, so people can join us in that whole struggle. And most recently, I think many of us are very worried that even if Trump loses the elections, he may not leave office. And so together with George Lakey and Daniel Hunter and others, we are starting .org. .us, choosedemocracy.us. And our hope is that hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of Americans, if essentially Trump attempts a coup d'etat, we will engage in massive nonviolent resistance to allowing that to happen. And we do have the power in our hands. We found out in various places around the world, lose their power and have to leave. So check out choosedemocracy.us. So at 80 years old, I found it pretty hard to retire in the world that we're living in.
David, let me interject here because you've given some incredible resources to your well-known and beloved work. Perhaps I can get together with you and get those links, and we'll make sure they're loaded up into the Nuremberg Actions website. Sign up for some of these
Thank you to
wonderful
everyone
initiatives.
for your involvement in Nuremberg Actions and your love and your being part of the beloved community and all you've been doing ever since.
Thank you, David. Many of our friends today did not raise their hand, and it was, it was totally fine for people to come and just listen in. If you would like to share something later, with the beautifully copied by Michael, so nurembergactions.com. Please send in articles, photographs, reflections. Maybe something came up for you today. Many, many thanks for all of you joining us. Take care, everybody.